My name is Jacqueline Muthura. I am a programs manager at the Local Public Sector Alliance, and it is my privilege really to welcome you to this workshop. We are going to be talking about elevating the debate on decentralization and multi-level governance in Africa, but with a focus on devolution in Kenya. We have very distinguished guests in our midst. We have thought leaders, and it's really exciting to see these experts coming together. I can already see the knowledge exchanges taking place, and I'm very confident that we will elevate the debate on decentralization in Africa and really advance the agenda. We are very optimistic. Yesterday, we had a discussion on we need to even be bolder, because we have the thought leaders, we have the solutions in this room. So it's very, very exciting to see you. Thank you very much. My job here is very simple. It's to welcome you, as is custom in Kenya. And I know my boss is looking at me. We are going to start our day with a word of prayer. Sylvia is already ready to pray for us. Maybe be upstanding. Thank you. Thank you, Jamie.
Let us pray. Almighty Father, we come before you. We thank you for this day. We thank you for a beautiful day. We thank you for bringing everyone together. We ask of you to help us so that we may engage in a meaningful discussion. It is in Jesus' name we do believe and pray. Amen.
Thank you. Short and to the point. Thank you very much. This event is organized by the Local Public Sector Alliance in partnership with our partners, including the IGRTC. I know you know who that is. The Institute of Local Government Studies in Ghana, the East Africa Local Government Associations, the Dula Omar Institute from the University of Western Cape. And I wanted to take a minute to recognize that. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning. And we are optimistic, as I said, that the insights and the knowledge that will come from this workshop will really contribute to advancing the debate on decentralization in Africa. My job is to do a little bit of housekeeping, inform you if you need to use the washroom, just go out this way, opposite the wine bar. Don't stop at the wine bar, on the right. Thank you. Just at the right, outside, on this side, through this corridor, on the right, you will find the gents and the ladies. We will be having our tea at 10:30, right outside here, and our lunch will be on first floor. Welcome very much. Alice Hongo, Madam Alice Hongo. And this morning's session will actually be moderated by the co-chair of the Sub-Saharan Working Group, Sub-Saharan Africa Regional Working Group, Madam Judy Oduma. I would like to take this moment to invite her to take us through the next level. Please clap your hands as she comes. Thank you. Please give her a hand as she comes. It is early morning. Thank you.
Good morning. Very happy to have you here. Very, very happy to have you here. We would like to start, but before I start, I would like to ask that our ED actually gives us just one word. He doesn't like talking. That's why he ran away from his desk. Jamie, please welcome Jamie, just for a word, then we can begin.
Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Judy. My name is Jamie Boex. I'm the Executive Director of the Local Public Sector Alliance. I just want to take literally 1 minute, and we've been together as a group for a few days now. In the other room, we had a timer, so we've become good at keeping it short. But I just want to say thank you to all guests, all of our partners, all the colleagues in the room. LPSA is a bit of a weird organization. The easiest way to explain it to our friends in Kenya is we are the Intergovernmental Relations Technical Committee for the rest of the world. We try to bring people together. You have a wonderful committee here that is already bringing together partners across different levels of government to have conversations about how to best make multi-level governance work. And that is effectively our ambition to bring colleagues together from around the world, different countries. For the past few days, since Monday morning, we have already been in a room in this establishment being hosted by our Kenyan colleagues and friends to talk about decentralization, localization, and multi-level governance in Africa. We've had colleagues from South Africa, from Uganda, from Malawi, from, let's see, where else do we have colleagues? Cameroon. We were joined online by Mali. We were joined online by Nigeria. Zambia, very importantly. See, they're a rebellious bunch. For one moment, just so that everyone knows who has been with us today, please wave if you've been here together with us. These are your international colleagues. What we wanted to make sure is that they benefit from the experience that our Kenyan colleagues have. We've, over the past few days, learned that every country is challenged with devolution. One of our colleagues, I won't mention who, said it's like a Catholic marriage. You're a man and a woman, you're together. Sometimes you're happy, sometimes not, but you're always together as different levels of government. So that is not just how it is in Kenya, that's how it is in every country. And so one thing we're hoping to learn today is the experience from Kenya, because from sharing experiences, we've noticed that perhaps with South Africa, Kenya is, if not among the most devolved countries on the continent, and there is a lot to learn. So we thought, let's take half a day to learn from Kenya, to share with Kenya, and to see how we can together elevate the debate on decentralization, localization, and multi-level governance. So thank you for that. Thanks to all of our co-chairs, Judy, Yap, Kawala, who is the third co-chair of the local public sector Sub-Saharan Africa Working Group, who have put this event together. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jamie doesn't like speaking. He likes running away, but thank you for that. I think it's important that we know who is on the table, who is in the room, because for the last 2 days, we've been looking forward to this day. The reason why we had this first ever meeting in Nairobi, was because of the devolution component. How did we do it as Kenya? But so that we know who is here, can we just start with introductions from somebody next to Jackie? Augustine. Just your name, what you do, and the country, before I invite my co-chair for just 1 minute. I know you're eating into the time, but I think we'll manage it.
Thank you very much. I'm Augustine Magolawando. I am the thematic co-chair for the Local Democracy Working Group of the LPSA. I am from Malawi, and in my other capacity, I work for Democracy Works Foundation as Regional Director.
Thank you.
Good morning, all. My name is Tembo Mkapa, Zambian. I'm a senior staff training officer from Chalimbana Local Government Training Institute. Thank you very much.
My name is Alice Malonte. I come from Cameroon, and I am a consultant in leadership and management. I work on decentralization, local governance, but also on gender and women's leadership. So I'm happy to be in Nairobi. Thank you.
Good morning. Yes, my name is Tom Were. I'm the Executive Director of Act Change Transform, a national NGO in Kenya that has been working in governance, democracy, and human rights since 2001. It's over 20 years now. And we are currently implementing the Kenya Devolution Program funded by the British High Commission here in Nairobi. Thank you.
Morning. My name is Anki Delnes, and I'm a Swedish citizen working in Kenya with UNDP as a senior governance expert. And I have also been in a few other countries with UNDP and other organizations. So happy to be here with you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Gronia Kidakwa. I'm the resident program manager of VNG International. VNG is a Dutch organization. It's the Association of Municipalities in the Netherlands.
Hello, good morning. My name is Nicholas Awache. I'm the director of the Institute of Local Government Studies in Ghana. And with the Local Public Sector Alliance, I am advisory board member.
Good morning. My name is Mark Osiche. I'm an independent consultant. I'm Kenyan and with a lot of interest in issues of local government and devolution.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gertrude Rose Gamwera, Secretary General for East African Local Government Association, born in Uganda, raised in Kenya, working in Tanzania, our headquarters. Good morning. I'm Angeline Hongo. I'm Kenyan. I work with the Intergovernmental Relations Technical Committee as a member. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Mercy Wangoi. I work with Act Change Transform. We are implementing the Kenya Devolution Program funded by FCDO, and I lead our work on public expenditure management on the support to the county governments.
Morning. My name is Jacqueline Mugeni. I work with the judiciary as a judge in the Environment and Land Court. And I'm also the president of an association called Pan-African Association of the Judges who are interested on matters of environment, land, and social livelihoods as they affect us in Africa. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Muratha. I am a villager from Olkeri village, Olkeri ward, Kajiado County. I think that gives me a lot of perspective on what we are discussing today. But other than that, I work for the World Bank on some of our devolution programming.
Good morning. My name is Kon Omore Osendo, a governance consultant based here in Nairobi. Just recently transitioned, I think, last week from FCDO, where I led the devolution program, amongst other things, for 8 years, and it's good to be here. Thank you.
Good morning, habari ya asubuhi. My name is Paddy Sianga Knudsen. I come from Zambia, but currently living in Germany. I'm a development economist and working principally around fiscal decentralization.
Good morning. My name is Avril Bundell. I'm Canadian. I worked with the Ontario government for many years in local governance and municipal finance policy, and I'm working with UN Habitat right now.
Good morning. My name is Henry Paul Gichana. I am Kenyan. I am based at Katiba Institute, where I'm leading Katiba Institute's devolution work. And I'm happy to have been part of this team from Monday and learned a lot. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Paul Otsola, an independent consultant in governance, devolution areas of PFM. I've been in the space since the start of devolution 2012. Currently doing some work with the World Bank under what we call the Kenya Devolution Support Program, Kenya Accountable Devolution Program. Yeah, and also doing some work for the EU, also within the devolution space. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Boris Donhauser. I work for Platforma, which is a network of cities, regions, and their associations active in decentralized development cooperation from Europe, and as well representing the Council of European Municipalities and Regions, which is the Pan-European Association of Local and Regional Self-Government in Europe.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Nick Travis. I'm from the UK. I'm an independent researcher and consultant in the area of public finance, but I work some of my time with LPSA, developing and rolling out its analytical tools. It's great to be here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Katama Kira. I am from Ethiopia. Currently, I'm working as a director of Center for Federalism and Governance Studies. My research and my teaching areas are in the areas of decentralization and intergovernmental relation. I'm glad to be here. Good.
Thank you. Is that the last? I think we have one more.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Ogutu.
I serve as the executive director for the Movement for Community-Led Development, which is a global alliance of civil society organization championing localization of SDGs and devolution largely in Africa. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Jackie?
Oh, okay. I'm Jackie Muthura. I work for LPSA in two capacities. One as the Localizing Women's Economic Empowerment Project Manager. I am also coordinating and co-chair of the Gender Equity and Women's Empowerment Working Group. Thank you.
Thank you. SG, join us on this table. Chepkon, join us on this table. Then you can introduce yourself. Yes, please.
All right, thank you. Sorry for that. Chepkon is my name. Kipkurui Samuel Chepkon. I'm the CEO, IGRTC, Intergovernmental Technical Relations Committee. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. And we know that your chair will be joining. Yeah, thank you. Yep, just for 1 minute, just say a word as a co-chair. We normally have 3 co-chairs in the sub-Saharan Africa. We have Kawala. Unfortunately, she was not able to make it. I think she had some work in Istanbul. She passes her regards, but represented here by Malongte, who has been with us since Monday. I would like that Yap gives us just a word before we can continue.
Thank you so much, Judy. My name is Jaap de Visser. So as Judy indicated, I'm one of the 3 co-chairs of the Sub-Saharan Working Group, together with Judy and Ka. And in my spare time, I'm also the National Research Chair in Multi-Level Government at the Dalla Omar Institute at the University of the Western Cape. And one of the wonderful things about this meeting is that it is a coming together of old friends, colleagues, people that we've worked with. Katema is representing Addis Ababa University, with whom we have intense connections and collaborations. We've got Dr. Kichana, who's there in the corner, who did his PhD at the Dalla Omar Institute. We've got Dr. Bozire, who still needs to introduce himself because he just stepped out. So I'm always looking after my former students, you know. So he also did his PhD at the Dalla Omar Institute. And there's so many colleagues here that are connected through the various organizations on the continent that are active in multi-level government, because multi-level government as a governance system, in whatever shape or form or configuration it runs, it thrives when there is knowledge production that elevates the debate on decentralization. So scholarship, expertise, practice comes together in support of multi-level government, and LPSA plays a very instrumental role in that, and wants to expand that and deepen that going forward. So it's a pleasure and a privilege for me to be here and learn from you know, the ambitious devolution program that Kenya is running. And I can assure you the rest of the continent is looking at what's happening here with great interest, because there are wonderful new practices and examples of multi-level government emerging on the continent itself, and that we can really learn from. So let me quickly hand over to Conrad so he can also introduce himself. Then we are complete.
Thank you. A very good shepherd. You are.
Thank you, Prof. Good morning. My name is Conrad Bozire. I'm a researcher and a scholar in the space of devolution, but I also work in the judiciary, and it's a pleasure to be here. I've been following the discussions from Monday, so it's good to be here physically for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bozire. And I think so that we don't waste a lot of time, we have been walking this journey for some time, and I think a few of us know about that, just hosting webinars, thinking about decentralization in Africa. What do we do? There are some gaps. How do we strengthen those? Where is the voice of the citizen? How do we make it work when it comes to issues of gaps in capacity building? But how can we also actually have a strong force around the continent to advocate for strengthening devolution? The biggest interest was in devolution in Kenya. And so we set aside this day just to listen and present facts, interesting challenges, interesting experiences around devolution in Kenya, so that we can all learn. And I would like to say that I think in our meeting yesterday, for those who are there, and also the evening session, we agreed somehow that even if you throw devolution or decentralization into the bush, or you consider it a sick patient, we said and agreed that it's a sick patient that never dies. And therefore, devolution, decentralization can never die. We only must bring it back, try to bring in energy, try to see why must we just let it be. We cannot. Therefore, this particular conversation, we think is very critical for all of us. Let's listen to the voices. And today we will be listening to devolution in Kenya. How can county governments more effectively promote localized sustainable development outcomes? We have questions that are very specific to our friends and partners who have worked in this field for so long. Kono More being one of them, and I would like to invite them to the podium so that we begin the conversation. Who is the immediate former governance advisor, British High Commission. Please join us. Give him a hand of applause. Muratha Kinuthia, the villager. This villager is an interesting villager. Everywhere he goes, he talks about that. And he's passionate about service delivery. Everywhere he goes, talks about service delivery. Welcome to the podium. And we also have Anki Delnas. Delnas likes speaking about the citizens. How do you involve the citizens? Working in this development world, being a Swedish, but having worked in Africa for a long time. What are the experiences that you're going to share with us? Kindly let us have you on the podium. Thank you, KK. You're welcome. Chairman IGRTC. I think we'll give you some time at some point to also introduce yourself. You have been with us. Others know you. The Kenyans know you, but it's just good. We'll just we'll give you time. And I think to the first question, which I would like to pose to Kon, as much as possible, let's try to keep, I think there's a clock somewhere. And remember, it is not us who brought the clock, it is Jamie. Because for us, we like talking. So Jamie thought that if we continue talking and talking and talking, we'll not be able to listen to the others. So for Kon, Kenya's reforms have been successful at reducing central state capture. And here we're talking about devolution experience. And the centralized political monotony, if you may call it, or monopoly. What can be done in your view, and of course with your experience, having worked for almost 8 or 9 years at the BHC, what can be done to get the vertical power balance between national and county governments right?
Check. Thank you. I hope I can be heard. You can hear me? All right, good. Thank you very much, Judy, and thank you to LPSA for the invite to be here. I was here yesterday, and I did enjoy the conversations that we had. Digging straight into the question, yes, I think in principle, Kenya's reforms in the last few years have been successful at reducing central state capture and the centralized political economy, and in some way reversed the country's path to fragility, as the question has been framed. But the trend seems to be toward increased centralization. I think first, I just want to spend a few minutes saying maybe, setting the stage with the things that probably you already know. I think what devolution tried to cure was regimes and political administrations that since independence did not have a clear framework for equitable distribution of resources. First, what was inherited from the colonial government was, of course, a fairly good administrative structure for having presence across the country, but also a development plan that sought to focus resources on areas that were considered productive and less of those resources to areas that were considered unproductive. So you had sections of the country that benefited from this policy, a lot of them along what we know as the Mombasa-Kisumu railway line and what is also known as the White Highlands or the Happy Valley, if I may add that. But so these are parts of central Kenya, Central Rift Valley, and really all along that railway line is what our initial policy was focused on. But the other thing that you saw systematically happening, especially the first, maybe from 1963 to 2002, quite overtly, was also resource allocation based on political alignment. So a patron-client kind of relationship built by these administrations, so that not only are we developing or putting resources in areas that are considered productive and less in the unproductive areas, but also in areas that have supported whoever then has won or is in power. And it was all about coming in, setting up your patron-client structures. And I think our first administration running until 1978 did that, and the next one came and dismantled what had been put in by the first administration and created another different patron-client relationship. That was really what resource allocation was about. I think the other thing that you see is that Kenya is a highly ethnic. Kenya's politics is heavily ethnocentric, like many other countries across the world, and you still see that today. So devolution then came in to try and cure that. We have these 47 counties picked from districts that were set up, I think, as of 2002. And again, a lot of these districts that became counties represented communities. And so you had more of the cake then being shared across the country equitably, and a deliberate plan for distributing nationally raised revenue put in place, as well as structures for raising taxes. Did this reverse the country's path to fragility? In a sense. I think we've had long-standing disputes in the country, in different parts of the country, way before devolution came in. But something interesting you see with devolution is that when counties are now in charge of raising revenue, and a lot of this revenue is raised from towns and business licenses, we had a more protracted kind of disputes coming out around border towns. So while some of these border areas had already had disputes going, devolution kind of scaled this up, because these towns are now sources of revenue and not just a boundary dispute. And so you got traders being charged by 2 different counties, or you got some towns that no one can even collect revenue because of the tension. And we see that, I think, in the country, we have over 15 to 20 of those kind of disputes, 10 of them being quite major in different parts of the country. So while it may have reversed what we would see as large scale say violence, I think it kind of enhanced this kind of clamor for towns that give us revenue, and so we're going to fight over this. But just to cut my time on that, I think the trend, yes, I agree, the trend has seemed towards increased centralization. And what we've seen, and I put down some notes around elements of this centralization that that we're looking at. The Constitution came in and had very good principles and objects of devolution that was meant to really cure the kind of resource allocation that we had from independence. But the centralization, as we've seen, one, you see the initial governors elected on the first term in 2013 really came in with a lot of gusto to defend devolution. But over time, we are seeing sometimes a bit of an alignment to party lines when push comes to shove. But that is not the norm. It's really exceptional in certain cases. I think we still see our governors jointly putting the interests of the counties and devolution ahead of their own political party interests. But sometimes they are forced to fall back on the party line, and this is driven largely by the national government alignments that take place. I think another area that you see this party line having precedence is in the impeachment of governors. When this impeachment process starts at the county assembly level and gets to the Senate for ratification, if I may use that term, there's always then that party line that kicks in, and less of the accountability that probably should kick in. The delays we see in the funds flow to counties doesn't enable counties to effectively deliver the services they need to, and also keeps a stranglehold on the resources that should flow from nationally raised revenue from the exchequer. I think that those delays have really brought a bit of frustration around keeping or deepening devolution, but also you've got other forms of funds, and I think we had this discussed yesterday. You've got in Kenya the Constituency Development Fund, which is managed or the patrons are members of parliament who provide oversight at national level. I think the other day I was listening to debate in parliament, and one of the members of parliament who was shooting down a proposal for an increase in the collective amount going to counties said that if we allow this increase to take place, it's going to eat into our collective CDF fund. And I was really shocked to hear that. But you're also seeing the senators who are supposed to then protect devolution, provide oversight, making a demand to also get their own allocation of funds to do this oversight that they need to do, and also to sit in the development committees or decision-making table of the county governments as members, and to make decisions around how county governments would spend, as opposed to being providing oversight. I think for me, those are some of the things that are showing recentralization. County governments have also had varied ways of deepening devolution within the county. So while devolution has taken place and counties have their functions that they're running, you'll find that different counties deepen that devolution further. Some counties have re-centralized at county level so that functions and resources have been transferred, but they're then re-centralized at the county level and not deepened to the village level. But you've got other counties that have done a very good job at creating structures that ensure that resources, decision-making, public participation, etc., is deepened right to the village level. So there's a bit of re-centralization happening in some sectors, and things getting stuck at the county level. Those are some examples I would give. And how do we get this vertical balance back? The vertical balance between national and county governments back. I'll just give a couple of points. I see Judy looking at me. One, I think there needs to be a clear separation of powers and responsibilities between the executive and the legislature. I think that would really help. Two, and I know now that I've transitioned from the development partner space, I can say some political things, which my colleagues won't be free to say. We've seen a trend. Let me not say we. I've seen a trend around the accountability that governors would have when they're defending devolution. In the first lot of governors, we had a very spirited joint push, regardless of which party elected you, by those governors to ensure that we protect this devolution. I think they caught everyone flat-footed. They caught the senators flat-footed, and you had a very strong secretariat, a very strong crop of governors who were able to just secure the space in the first term. And in the second term, I think you also had a lot of the minority party governors chairing the Council of Governors. So that accountability form continued. But there's been a trend when you've got, I think governors felt that we should elect our leadership aligned to the party that is in power or to the majority, and that is going to help us get things done. But I think there's a mixed feeling as to whether that has worked or whether that will work. And maybe it's a time for the Council of Governors to have a laid-down policy like we have in Parliament. In Parliament, the minority, the standing orders are very clear that the minority side chairs the Public Accounts Committee, the Public Investments Committee, etc. Our devolution process is still at a space where a lot of accountability, a lot of push, a lot of checks is needed. And sometimes in our system, this is well done or well pushed by the minority side. So maybe the Council of Governors could consider and say that our chair will be from the minority side so that they can push without feeling that they need to toe a certain line that may not allow them to then push the agenda quite well. That is just a wild thing I thought about actually last night. If at this level that the accountability approach would be taken. Let me stop there for now, Judy, and allow my colleagues.
Thank you very much, Con. Accountability. You remember colleagues yesterday and the Monday meeting, we still spoke about a lot about accountability and how do we strengthen accountability is coming up again. I would like to tie that now with the Muratha coming in. He was actually one of the biggest contributors of the book, and I think I would advise that all of us go, and I think, I'm sure you'll talk about it, making devolution work for service delivery. And I'm just wondering what you have to tell us today when it comes to local service delivery, Muratha, and development as the mainstay of devolution and the clamor for self-governance. What is your perspective on county performance to ensure service delivery works for Kenya? And maybe in this context, for Africa, what would you think about?
Thank you very much, Judy. And maybe before I answer that question, allow me two preliminary comments. Number one, when I saw that we are meeting in the whiskey bar, I was expecting a slightly different environment where we could speak more openly as we take those things that Con likes. But then...
So do we rearrange the room? Maybe Jamie was right.
I thought LPSA is very innovative. They have finally cracked how we can have real conversations about some of these issues. Then number two, maybe just to maybe do a slight rebuttal to something that Con said. First, I think it is right that you ask these questions in the order that you did. I know you've asked me a question on service delivery, but one thing we always say to people looking at Kenya's devolution is that the proximate trigger that allowed us to have the devolution reforms in the Constitution was to resolve political problems. I mean, ultimately, what we then wrote into the laws and other things were, service delivery and so on. But the trigger that gave us is that because we had to resolve how we live together as a nation, the issues of power sharing, And without going into that history that Con has given, is that right from the independence, the problems between Kanu, Kadu, big tribes, small tribes, how people feel included. And to that extent, devolution has been a huge success in terms of resolving the political problems, and we hope that will persist. I think Con said that it has enhanced, and I think maybe what he meant was some of the contestation, but actually at the local level, there had been fears that we would see greater local level conflict with devolution over resources. And we used to work with Con and many others here in the political and democratic governance space, and we used to have a lot of, as were then known, constituency and others that were red zones for conflict. I would actually hazard to say that we have less conflict, even at the local level, with devolution than prior to devolution. So with the exception maybe of Marsabit County, for those of you who may know these places where we've seen quite a lot of conflict that's rare, and to an extent Lamu, the degree to which we had anticipated that you'd have local level political violence. So it's not to say conflict is not there, but that violence has actually been less. So, and maybe the researchers here might want to investigate why that is the case, but it could be the negotiated democracy and other things that that we see that allow for that. Whether it will persist, we'll look. But now then coming to the question that you've asked on service delivery, if I can start with the positives, is that devolution has certainly increased access to services. So I'm sure you went through yesterday what the devolved functions are. In terms of quantity, so if you look at whether it is health, which is one of the major devolved services, we've seen significant expansion in health facilities. We've seen significant expansion in the numbers of health workers. But for instance, if one was to look at the norms and standards, the expansion in facilities has outstripped the expansion in staff. And some of that, even as we hire more staff, we are not able to have, like where it says it should be at least a minimum of 2 for a particular level of health facility. That has not been possible. And the counties are in a conundrum because they already have a big wage bill. So you are unable to hire for some of these critical spaces. But when we did this report, and I know people like KK who are here, I think there's one other person who was part of that report. I'm trying to remember, of course, people like Jackie were part of that. Jamie was also part of the team. We asked people that question of, would you rather have a health facility 5 kilometers away from you, within 5 kilometers, but with one staff? Or would you rather have within 10 to 25, but with the requisite 2? And most of them said it's better to have that one with one person. So if you look at access, that's there. If you look at ECD, early childhood development, their counties have hired staff, they have built facilities. If you look at agriculture, a lot of programs on inputs and so on. So on the quantity, that's definitely there. I'll come back later to the issues around quality. In terms of equity, at least cross-county equity, we've seen huge improvements. Those of you who have worked on Kenya or understand Kenya, I was in Bangkok last week and I met a lady who told me, I used to live in Lokichogio. And she asked me what was the impact of closing the South Sudan Lokichogio outpost on Turkana. And I told her to a large extent, I'm sure maybe for the people living there, there has been some impact, but broadly speaking, that impact has been muted. But this is a person who was coming from a time when counties like Turkana, it was not then a county, it was a district, was basically an NGO outpost. That place was run by Oxfam, ActionAid, the various UN agencies, and government was not there. But now if you look at the county government of Turkana, it gets the second highest amount of equitable share. And there's an expression we used early on that was not always popular with the counties, where we said some of these counties are now cash rich. So the county government itself actually has resources, even though people are still poor. But many of these counties now have resources. And I know, and maybe Con and others might have experienced. Now, more and more, even for us, when we ask for a meeting with the governor, they ask, what are they bringing to the table? Because they have their own resources. Whereas there was a time that could have been something that, you needed to rely. And so that, as I said, in terms of resources, and there's huge complaints, you will see there's a very live debate going on now, whether it's 1 man, 1 vote, 1 kilometer. We had a very highly redistributive formula. The third thing that has gone very well is allocative efficiency. Because now these resources are there at the level of each county, when you speak to the governor of Homa Bay, she comes and tells you, Moratha, our priority is cotton. Whereas cotton may not be a national priority, sometimes cotton may not be as political a commodity as, say, maize, or sometimes, sugar and so on. The governor of Homa Bay knows cotton is my priority. And even when you discuss with her, when you do programming, that's where she's putting in money. In a national system, that may not always have happened. You'd have had some crops that get a lot of the attention, others that get less attention. If you look at maternal mortality, Kenya is 2 countries. Some countries, counties up north, their maternal mortality figures were not different from Somalia, which is a state that has not had a government, at least in many parts of the country, for a very long time. But I remember in conversations, for instance, with Garissa County, they were able to focus on something like that and even come with simple, innovative solutions, because the CEC of health is focused on the problem that's there, as opposed sometimes to bigger national problems. And then finally, what has gone well is on political accountability, is that governors, especially in some of the more homogeneous counties, of course, all counties are heterogeneous in Kenya, but some are more homogeneous, is that when Kon runs for governor in his county, chances are that his immediate competitor will be from the same ethnic group. So going back to the ethnocentric politics, you cannot come and say, vote for me, because you have to defend our people. So governors know you will be voted out. At the national level, as president, you can still do badly, but, call to that ethnic component, because at the national level, it still remains very much an ethnic census. For many governors, that's not the case. And I can tell you from interactions that they feel the heat. They call me when grants are late. They do that because they know if you don't deliver, chances are, and we have seen that. In terms of maybe what's not working as well is on the quality of services. There's been a huge focus on the visible infrastructure, staffing, all of which come with procurement opportunities, patronage opportunities to hire people. But the quality aspects are not always there. So you've built a facility, you've hired, but are we tracking, are people as happy with the services that are there? And one of the examples that was very good, because I'd been speaking about this about a month ago, giving the example of the Kenya Urban Support Program, which is a program that the World Bank funded, where governors were very keen to buy garbage skips and all that, which cost money. But in a presentation, which was a positive presentation from Homa Bay County, again to use that as an example, they had a photo which they didn't realize, where they had one of those huge metallic garbage bins, but all the garbage was outside the bin. So programs that try to look and see mind change and all that, why are people still throwing that when you have, those might not get money. Even when people do, and I know there's going to be a second question, which we'll be talking about participatory governance, we have projectized development. So when people discuss, they say we want a health facility, they don't say we want health services. And a facility on its own is not sufficient in terms of delivering services. So I would say that that's one of the big challenges. And then finally, we need to improve intergovernmental relations, even at the county level. So when you asked the question and you said counties, the county, I was not sure whether you mean county government, which is what in most cases we refer to, but actually the Kenyans expect services at the county, because all services ultimately happen at a county, at a ward, and those are from both national and county government. We've seen improvements in the last year and a half, at least on certain issues.
including some of these responses. We saw it during COVID, where when the two levels of government worked well during the response. So, but more and more we need to come and say, what is the plan for delivering services for people from Kitui County, be they from national and county government? And because of some of that mistrust, we have never managed to get, there was an idea of having some sort of, the CIDP should capture all this. So I would say that's still an area that remains for development. And I can donate 22 seconds back to the session.
Thank you very much. Thank you. A clap for him. Thank you. Decision making closer to the people, services to the people, those ones that really didn't even have those services and growth and development. Wajir, the northern counties, at least experiencing a difference with devolution, prioritization, and planning. I think that is key that has come from this, but also, again, accountability issues still arising from this conversation. And I think the other negatives, the quality of services, I think we've spoken about it. A little bit of them still need to be improved. Projectized services, I don't know, maybe that's something to elaborate and discuss even further. And I think I would like to now bring in Anki to just share with us, given that we know we've worked with her for so long. I think in Kenya, she has had experiences in Africa, having come from a development world. Sweden, by the way, is one of the countries that it is thought does public participation very well. Yeah, Anki, maybe she'll elaborate. So having served as a devolution expert and coming from a decentralized system, how best do you think African countries can advocate for and support more inclusive and effective decentralization and localization? But I would like to add the other question. What do you think would be the priorities that we can pick as LPSA? What can we pick and amplify and work on? Okay.
Thank you. And thank you to my two co-panelists for very insightful comments or talks. So I'm an intellectual historian by profession. So I was in university for a long time studying very old ideas on democracy. So my overarching perspective on when we talk about decentralization is how do we organize a society, a country, to make sure that people have a voice, that people can participate in decision making, because that's what democracy is about, isn't it? That people have access to what Morata was talking about, services, wherever they live in that particular area. Because isn't that the ultimate goal with a democratic society and a decentralized society? So if we think about it from that perspective, and you gave some good example, I was going to bring up Mandera. In Mandera, there is no other employment than the county government. So when then we talk about own source revenue, it comes in a very different perspective from if you look at Nairobi as an area where you can collect a lot of more own revenues in a particular county. So what is then the role of the state in making that organization of a society? So you actually enable people up in the northeastern Kenya, or in my country, we are a very long, narrow country. Up in the north, where you have sunshine, maybe 4 months a year, there is not that many people that are so willing to move up there and live there. And there is difficulties for the government at all 3 levels, as we have, to make sure that people have access to the same quality of services as they have in the capital areas. So that's the challenge. But sometimes when we talk as decentralization experts, we zoom into different technical details. I mean, does it really matter if the taxes or the revenues for a county or for a municipality or for a region comes from income tax, business licenses, or whatever? I mean, there is no best model that everyone has to take just because one successful country organizes itself around income tax, as my country, Sweden. Other countries do not do that. So okay, my historian background comes in. If you look at the history of a country and the context, we are all so different. I mean, you have a colonial background that many other countries do not have. Those colonial structures are still very present. When I came to Kenya, I was here briefly around 2010, 2011, so actually before the devolution process have started fully. I was working in Asia. And I could quickly discover the same kind of British reminiscence that they have in Burma, Myanmar. You have the same here in Kenya with your county commissioners, this, that. So those structures doesn't go away overnight. So when people here sometimes say devolution is dusted and done, I'm like, really? It's 10 years along the line. If I look back at my own country, we have maybe a story of, maybe depressing to hear, but 100 years to reach the stage where we are. And we are still talking about questions on who should be responsible for certain services. Because sometimes you decentralize. 25 years ago, we decentralized primary education to be the responsibility of the municipalities. Based on the same principles, we talk about subsidiarity principle, push them down. And it was said that municipalities better know how to organize the schools in the area because they're closer to it rather than the central government. So what has happened? We have gone down in all international comparisons since that decision. So now there is a discussion about should we centralize it again? I'm not saying, so what I'm saying is that there is no cut in stone that this is always the best decision. It has to be a discussion. It has to, you have to follow, you have to look at data, statistics, and be ready to maybe change decisions. Same after COVID. As I mentioned, in Sweden, there are 3 levels. So the regions are responsible for the big hospitals, and also the regulations at that time regarding COVID, what people were allowed to do and the vaccinations and all that. And it was very different in the 21 regions we have. And when we compare that with other countries with a more centralized approach to exactly the same thing, maybe those results were better. So I think it's a healthy discussion to talk about what levels should be responsible for what. And it's not something that is done in 10 years or 20 years. I think it's ongoing always. I mean, Plato and Aristotle started to talk about democracy 2000 years ago. And we still talk about how to organize societies so people can have access. What are the innovative way of getting people's voices? You are never ever, this is a country of 54 million population. So I went to my own country, we are 11 million. We have 1.4 million civil servants, 1.4 million. They are mainly working at the municipality in education sector and in the health sector. But that gives you a little bit of a perspective on what is the issue, wage huge bill, because you have civil servants out there who are to deliver services. So, I mean, of course, it's useful to look at what others are doing, but don't just do that as a panacea for success. Put it in a perspective, put it in that particular context that the country comes from. And then this discussion about, I must actually comment on intergovernmental relations. I think I have never heard so much talk about intergovernmental relations as I have in Kenya. I mean, from my own perspective, having living in my country for quite many years, I never even heard about it. It's not an issue because the mandate for each level is very, very clear. Of course, there is discussions. If there is a big highway going to be built across the country, of course, the other governments, regional entities are informed, and the municipalities. And then I started to think, why can it be like that? And of course, it's because those mandates are having been there for such a long time. So everyone knows its responsibility and you are exercising your task. whilst here that is not the case. There was recently, State Department of Devolution was looking into overlapping functions, and there's a lot of overlapping functions. And then, of course, it's very important to have the intergovernmental relations discussion and functions ongoing, so those things can be cleared. But I would guess that 20 years from now, KK would not be necessary any longer because those things are then settled. And that's a good thing, isn't it? So, I mean, maybe sometimes I think the focus would be more on clarifying the mandate and enable the environment for those levels to exercise their mandate. But intergovernmental relation commissions and such things are a tool to achieve that. And I think we should have that in mind. Yes, I very much agree with you, Marata, when you say that devolution have significantly improved also the political scene and the relations between people living. But there is also a bit of criticism around the corruption element, that devolution have also decentralized corruption. And I think that has to do very much with the relation, the social contract, the relation between the state and the citizens. Because if you are not sure that this will remain for a long time, the conditions are not set, so to say. Everyone wants as much as possible for the period you can take it. And that is something that seriously can undermine the good things that decentralization, devolution actually have achieved in the country. So I think that is something one need to think about. And that's why all those core values of democracy and of decentralization are so important, that there is transparency, that there are accountability mechanisms in place, that there is a participatory approach, so people are not just left out. Maybe they see in the newspaper that, oh, there's a public participation around this topic, but there is, and so what? It's just a tick the box thing. There is no real structures in place that take representation and all that into account and have come up with a solid model for how can that participation look like. So that's also something for the future. And I think I do as Morata, I even donate a little bit more, 50 seconds instead of 25. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know whether, thank you. I give, a good clap. Very interesting discussion, participatory approaches, decentralized corruption, I think, coming up today. And I think the issue of introducing really social contracts, I'm sure our discussant today, Tom Were, will also touch on that. I'm very, very sure, because of what ACT Change Transform is doing. What are the core values that we must stick by, decentralization. I like the issue of data, statistics, to inform our decisions. It has come up on Monday, on Tuesday very heavily, and again, this is coming up today. Really, decentralization, employment in Mandera, that it's only the government that employs, really, meaning that we can actually have this discussion about how do we create employment, but also being innovative around it. It's important to consider context. I like that, and the different models. It's not a one straight jacket. Different models, different approaches to implementing decentralization, and it takes time to work. And I think we started by saying yesterday, I think the patient that never dies, you can never wish it away. Dialogue, continuous dialogue to know what dimensions work, what does not work. We must rely again on data to inform policy. And of course, innovation is also coming up here. Intergovernmental relations, I think, yes, in Kenya, we talk about it so much. And maybe a further discussion on that. Is it that we don't have clear mandates, developing functions? 20 years is a lot for KK to wind up this work. With the CEO, I know what we are actually, with a goodwill, doing, and just stating, in fact, for him, he was telling me yesterday, I think we just have to do this in 5 years and let it done. because we know there have been overlapping functions. We know where the problem is. We know which organizations need to just please agree that these are county government functions that will have better services delivered if we have these ones, wound down, which is a good thing. I don't know whether we can, I think I'll give you another 1 minute later to talk about what we can elevate, although I've already highlighted, I think, from the discussion and the summary. So for just 1 minute, because I would like us to have questions, 1 or 2 minutes, and I think Jackie helped me that. We only have 12 minutes. For the audience or for the speakers? For the audience, would you like them to have questions asked first, and then you can just use that to, also touch on the questions that remained. Can I now open the floor for questions to the three and see how much we can be able to respond to? Do we have questions? Wow. Everybody has their hand up. I'll start with Augustine. I'll go to Paul, then Henry. Can I skip you first for the first round? Then I'll come back to you, and then Nicholas. Then I'll go to the next round. I've already seen the hands. Augustine.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's really great to have this special moment of reflecting quite deeply on a country that is going through devolution in practice. And I appreciate, because in Southern Africa, I think we are really struggling with these processes, and there's so much we can learn. I have two questions. One is to do with what Muratha started off with when he spoke about devolution in Kenya was triggered largely as a response to what otherwise was a political problem. And of course, in the process, the rest had to follow. It kind of reminds me of one of the discussions that sometimes surfaces when it comes to democracy and democratization, where arguments are put forward to say, in the first instance, it's a response to a governance problem. But when we discuss and when we think about democracy, there's been this association of it should deliver. There must be democratic dividends. And when the assessments are being done, the frustrations are more on the dividends, and we tend to forget about what otherwise triggered it. I would like to appreciate, in terms of your own appreciation, like in the case of Kenya, where, as a person, where do you put the value, the weight, when you reflect on devolution? Because I think it's important to think about that. Oftentimes, those political solutions are not necessarily the economic solutions we need, but there's a kind of a relationship there. Secondly, I am very much impressed with the Swedish experiences. And I think it's important to recognize indeed the use of data and the culture of reflection and learning. And when I think about this now in the Kenyan experience, I would like to hear a bit more from the Kenyan colleagues in terms of what specific mechanisms are in place to do two things. One, to ensure that there are deliberate efforts to generate that kind of data that will be continuously inform the decisions that have to happen. And I think it's important because when you listen to what is working and what is not working, and the possibilities of reversing certain reforms because you realize maybe we are not getting to where we are, it would mean someone is taking care of that. Someone is deliberately taking care of that. In the case of Kenya, who is that who is taking care of this to ensure that there's continuous reflection and learning, and that the data that is being generated is indeed being used to inform those kind of reflections?
Thank you. Who is our next? Was it Paul? Try to be brief, please, so we can give more time to the others.
Yeah, thank you. Let me stand, because those are very good presentations. Maybe just to start from the top, where these things happen, from the governance, the leadership side of things. And what Kon said is very true. There are very worrying trends in terms of things being centralized. and the interest of the leaders at the county level and the push they are able to show, like compared to where it started in 2013 in terms of defending devolution. So it's a big worry. And I think what I would like to hear from you, Con, and maybe from the rest of the participants, is just from the high level, what could be some of the solutions? Because this trend is there. And it's interesting you talked about it. And when I met Lady Justice Jackie earlier in the morning, we actually talked about the same thing. And looks like if the experts within this space have already realized that that is the trend, then we need to start thinking of solutions as we go forward. So maybe one or two solutions that you may propose. To Muratha, I know there is actually evidence of what has happened at county level. There is evidence, and that is not denied. But someone asked, and maybe you can reflect on that, in terms of the absolute numbers, like what has happened in terms of fiscal transfers to the counties since 2013 to date, and what we see as the service delivery to the citizens. Do you think that is really proportional? It is something that you may want to look into.
Thank you. Can I cut you short?
Sorry?
Can I cut you short so that you give? Make it short. Make it short.
Okay, so the last one to Anki is the issue of public participation, citizen engagement. We're also seeing trends where the civil society and the citizens have actually, they are not moving, you know, like they have accepted that this is the way things are supposed to be. So they are not pushing for that accountability from the citizen service delivery perspective. And maybe your views on that also could help. Sorry, I thought you were interrupting me like the way the president interrupted.
No, thank you. No, I just wanted to make it short so that we can have more questions. The fourth one is okay. Thank you, Henry.
Sorry, I'll start with Anki's, argument about the need for flexibility in terms of functional allocation, and the functional allocation shouldn't be a one-off thing, which I fully agree with. But now the challenge with flexibility, obviously in Kenya, we've had that experience with the questioning about, for example, the development of the health function. And we've seen the whole issue of the strike by medics and the need to have that conversation as to whether there was actually legitimacy in the continued devolution of the health function. But now the challenge with having flexibility, because you realize what we did as in the Kenyan constitution is entrench and protect and prevent, some sort of amendments and, so my question really is, how do we balance flexibility with entrenchment? Because we already have an experience, post-independence experience, where devolution was done away with, hence the need for entrenchment. But the need to constantly engage in discussions around the continued legitimacy of some of these functions, how then should we strike that balance? And then now, Morade talked about cash-rich but poor counties. What explains that? What can be done about it? Because one of the things which we've been discussing since Monday is that the biggest problem we have with national governments is that they complain that there's no proof that money that is being devolved is actually working. We don't have evidence that it's actually working. And one of the things which we've seen in Kenya is members of parliament arguing that CDF does more than what counties have actually been doing. That if you go to the constituencies, you can be able to pick out projects which CDF has done, but governors don't have something to show for it. So the question then is, how do we then account and provide evidence of these changes or these value that we're actually adding from devolution? And the last one.
Thank you. Make it short. Thank you.
Back to Anki, an interesting perspective with respect to the whole issue of corruption. You seem to argue that the whole reason behind the devolution of corruption is you painted some tragedy of commons kind of scenario where the fear that something is no longer going to be there for long makes people want to scramble to actually take it apart. Do you intend to communicate that there is a way that corruption can be addressed, sort of in a way that shows that some of these things are there for the long term, institutionalizing some of these, resources that are actually devolved? Or what is this perspective that you're actually trying to bring in as underlying corruption and a solution for it?
Thank you, Henry. We had the last one, Nicholas. Just try to be brief so we can allow another round. We only have 10 minutes, Jackie. Okay.
Yes, to be forewarned. Yes, coming from Ghana and having been involved in Ghana's decentralization for the past 25 years, and the frustration that personally I see in our type of decentralization, I get very excited here in Kenya's devolution. But I listen to you, I have two comments, and especially the first one to come. In terms of service delivery, is there minimum service delivery standard that the central government expects that all counties, irrespective of their revenue, should fulfill, so that there is, as a unitary state, there is a minimum standard that every citizen, wherever you live, must enjoy? If it's education, if it is health, is there a minimum standard that the central government expects? And are central government transfers based on this minimum standard, so that we see that every citizen is treated, equitably? Then the second one is conceptualization. The triggers or the motivators for the devolution. You mentioned, I think this is Muratha who said, to solve a political problem. And it appears that in solving that problem, you have created almost like a federal system, and yet you don't want to be seen as a federal state or a country. Is there something that you are concerned about, that if Kenya sees itself as a federal state, then ethnic issues could be exacerbated? And so you want to be seen as solving a problem, but you don't want what others use. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Can we take a round on that, please?
Yeah, thanks. I think I have about two questions that are directly asked. One from Paul around what some of the solutions would be to reverse decentralization. I think 13 years since we enacted the new constitution, 10 or 11 years since we had county governments in place, we still need some clarity or further clarity around the functions that each side needs to have. Of course, we have a Schedule 4 of the Constitution, which gives us very clearly what national and county governments, what functions they each have to implement. But I think if we do complete properly this process that the IGRTC is leading, where we want to just complete the costing and bundling and transfer of functions, I think this would help quite a bit in reducing that decentralization, in my view. If counties are allowed to then have in law the resources that should go to them that are still being held by the national government, and whatever those resources are, financial or capital, probably human resource, and the requisite functions, I think that would help. But two, the law also provides that devolution is supposed to be a process where there's cooperation and consultation between national and county governments. What I think we have seen, and that will touch on intergovernmental relations eventually, but what I think we have seen in some sectors in the last couple of years is a situation where the national government gets the county governments to sit and agree on certain policy issues that would want to push. And we have seen, for example, the county aggregated industrial parks, which is basically having every county to identify a space and provide a zone where we can set up an industrial park for investors to come in. And I think national and county governments signed some intergovernmental agreement to do this together, as well as the affordable housing. I think we saw it with the community health workers, several things. But when you dig deep, it's you get to hear different views around how these have been implemented. In some instances, if there is an agreement on the table that the national government will put in 50% of the resources, county governments should provide the land and probably add in some resources, you find that one partner or the other is not making good what they're supposed to do. And that then hampers a lot of that breeds in a lot of mistrust in that relationship. But also I think if we step up, and just to reemphasize what Murada has said earlier, if we step up our intergovernmental relations at the county level and at national level, and make this sector committees that have not been convened in the last 10 or so years to be dusted up and convened, and conversations to take place regularly at the county level and at the national level, I think that would really improve or bring clarity with regards to the roles that each side will have. And very quickly on the question around minimum service delivery standards that should be fulfilled, and whether our exchequer releases are based on this. I don't know what my Kenyan colleagues in the room would say. I don't think the basis of sharing revenue does have certain parameters that covers some services, but that disbursement is not clear that we're sending you this money and we're giving you certain standards that you're supposed to do for certain services. I don't think we have that. Even if the basis for sharing formula is based on parameters like health, an index on health services, urban poverty index, land size, population, etc., and that formula is calculated to determine how much you will get. But I don't think we have in this country certain standards you need to fulfill in service delivery for you to even get your next tranche of funds. But I stand to be corrected by my colleagues in the room. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Murada.
The closest we come to that is conditional grants, but here they are still relatively small. So we have conditional grants of, if you actually take both donor funded and government funded, would be broadly about just 10% of the larger discretionary, but those ones sometimes have. There have been attempts to do norms and standards, and that's a function of the national government. I wouldn't say it's as strong, but you'll have discussions like in the ag sector on how much you anticipate counties should budget for that. Let me combine a couple of issues on the political. I think on the issue of the federal, my sense is that unless it comes up, that boat has sailed. So the sort of fears people had, what the Swahili word for devolution in the old days was majimbo, which had a political connotation. And that is why it was then resisted a lot, that these would be enclaves of particular groups. I do not find, even when we have regional blocks, I do not find that that is dominating the conversation in Kenya. So I think now we've moved on more into unitary state. In fact, as we say, 48 governments, one nation. So in some ways, I mean, you have at the micro level, you'll have some of that. There'll be debates about where I come from, Kajiado. People will say, Amasai always has to be governor, and there'll be debates if someone tries to run. But it's not as big as what people used to fear. The interesting thing, and maybe I don't know if this meeting is being recorded, but maybe let me try and put it in an intellectual way.
Allowed.
In case it's recorded. On corruption, definitely, devolution has devolved corruption. If you take a very pragmatic view, and those of you who look at the nature of political settlements, now this is the intellectual bit, is that you look and say, nations are more stable when you have a more inclusive elite. What basically we are saying is that not one person is eating. So what devolution has done, and in part maybe even going back to the issue which I said where we've not even had subnational, is that there is inclusive eating. And that in a sense before, it would have been Muratha getting the contract to deliver mattresses to all of Kenya's clinics. Right now, Muratha will get for his county, Kon will get for his county. So from a purely, so when you look at those of you who look at political settlements, that explains some of our stability. And I think John Githongo put it very well in our Turn to Eat that, oh, okay, maybe this is not World Bank language, but allow me, that all the pigs had their snouts in the trough eating. None of them wanted to come up to even breathe. So that is allowing for some of the stability we are seeing on the political level. Data, there is a lot of technical issues. There's good administrative data in things like health. There's a dearth of data in things like water, agriculture. So it makes it very difficult to be able to look and even to see. You know, like we sometimes attack governors, say you're spending all your money on fertilizer and inputs. We don't have good data to be able to say, is that wrong? As whatever. So let me not say much on that. On value for money, definitely we are not getting value for money for the amount of money that is going down. But I think we are getting better value for money compared to pre-devolution. So any day I say, I would rather implement my projects through counties than through national government for a lot of the types of things that we have. But that is not, but there could be improvements. So I hope that distinction is clear. And then finally, on this sort of cash rich versus poor, the tragedy is that, and this is also a bit linked to something that Anki said, initially at the start of devolution, many of these counties, for the inherited workforce that they had about 70, 80% of their money that was they could be able, they had discretion. A county like Mombasa, after they pay salaries, is left with very little money that they have discretion over. We've seen a lot of employment. And the big challenge that we have, going back to what Anki said, is that actually I want to agree with her, is that we do not have enough staff. We've got critical gaps. The problem is that we also have too many staff that are not needed. And to give you a very personal example, when I finished Form 4, my now late uncle, who was high up in the Nairobi City Council, as we used to call it, offered me a job. All my cousins got jobs. My uncles, my aunties, all of them got jobs with the Nairobi City Council. And former Governor Kidero said it would have been cheaper for him to, this staff, the thousands of staff who you had 10 sweepers for a small stretch, to put them in a room. They report in the office, he locks them up in a room that they're not spending money because every time transport. So we have too many staff in the wrong places, not enough staff in the right places. Maybe I can stop there.
Thank you, Anki.
Okay, so you addressed corruption nicely, so I can leave that. But your question about public participation and also what you were touching up on entrenchment. Okay, so if we look at participation also from a historical perspective and from how countries evolve, it looks different. Go back a few thousand years, people met under a tree or at the agora, the square, and you have kind of direct elections in that space. Do we want this or that? We want this. Also remember that not everyone was allowed in there. Women was not, for instance, and so on. But now we have more, I would say, refined or a sophisticated way of encourage participation. Because election is not enough, that the world has kind of agreed on. It's too long in between elections, so we cannot only rely on representative elected people, because that in a way is the ideal model. You are many people, you elect your leader, you trust that leader to represent you. So we have to come up with something that works in between all this, which is not about going and ask every citizen what they want or what they think. So one have to think through those model of direct and indirect participation and to try to find a structure that people accept. That I'm not running on all meetings. I send Muratha because he is the one who represents my village or my Nyumba Kumbi or whatever. And I don't think those in Kenya are perfectly well in place yet. And in many countries that decentralized, this is the issue. This is really the issue. Again, if I take a comparison, when I moved back from Asia to Sweden, our municipalities also have difficulties to get people interested to do public participation. So they feel that we are sitting here alone. We are not kind of getting input from our citizens in between elections. So they try all kind of innovative ways of reaching out. Come and meet the mayor, have coffee with this, come and discuss this one or that one. So I thought like, okay, fine. Now I have been preaching about public participation for the last 10 years in the Asia context, which is not always the most easiest thing to do. Let me go for one of those meetings where the municipality invites for public participation. So I did, and so did one elderly gentleman, 75 plus, also. That's it. 2 people in a municipality of, I think, 60 or 70,000 people. And then you start to think like, why? But I think mainly because we trust that those people are doing their job. So why should I spend time on go there and have a view? I don't know much about building a bridge or doing that, whatever they were asking about. So public participation also sometimes is maybe needed at certain stages more than it will be over time. But for sure, all countries are struggling with the engagement between the elected and the citizens everywhere. So you can see very many different ways of trying to improve that. Switzerland also have direct elections on certain questions. So people are thinking, and that goes back to that entrenchment. You don't put the system in place and then you keep that forever. You refine. You need to have the basic fundamentals there. And then you, through studies, through data, through statistics, and here is why I think LPSA and also organizations like the World Bank, who have done wonderful analysis, where you are using data, where you're using things. So you can discuss what you are talking about, the standard of the quality of education each person, each child have the right to achieve. But you cannot do that if you don't know what is the ratio between the teachers and the students. What is the minimum level of education that teacher needs to have to teach in certain subjects, etc., etc. I leave it there.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think I would like, yes, a clap for Anki. Allow me to end this here because we have a continuation of another session, but linked to this. And we'll have a discussant who will touch bits and pieces of this and give us, some good way forward. Allow me to end this here. For the questions that we still have, can we carry them forward to the next session? Kindly. And with that, let's end. And I think tea is being served outside. But before that, can we give a very good hand of applause to our panelists? Thank you very, very much. For the clips that where you wanted to have clipped, brother, we will do that. Don't worry. Thank you very much.